Welcome to episode 50 of the AMT podcast. 50 episodes in. We've been going strong for 2 years now, and long may that continue. And remember, you don't always have to be on YouTube to tune in to these episodes. You can always have a listen on the go, since all these episodes are uploaded to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and my website. And what's even better is that for premium newsletter subscribers, you can expect episodes where I also interview fellow traders. So big developments happening over there. Make sure you do check out that link below. But for today, I want to talk about what sports that you should trade. Now, this is a question that probably throws up even more questions than answers, and there's no right or wrong way to answer it. So the best way to tackle that is to probably tell you guys how I ended up trading the sports that I do. Now, as many of you know, I trade horse racing, cricket, golf, and boxing, all profitably. Now, the way I stumbled into these sports was through a combination of trial and error, what resources were available to me at the time, what I understood at the time, and what I'd participated in. The only resources or only presence online from any traders at the time were horse racing traders, the likes of Con Berry, Peter Webb, and a couple of others. Nobody else was putting out content, so I didn't even think to trade other sports. Besides, horse racing was the only sport that offered daily action, so the lure of making a potentially stable income was also appealing. Now, before trading, I'd never watched a horse race in my life. I knew absolutely nothing about the sport. I'd never heard of any of the jockeys or the horses or the courses other than Ascot. I didn't know any of the lingo or any of the factors or variables that influence a race, like weight class, the going, the track, nothing. Everything was just completely foreign to me at the time. Now, what's funny is that it took me around 3 months before I started making a profit consistently off horse racing. But the irony is that I still knew nothing. And the reason for that is because I started out as a pre-race trader. So my focus was on chart reading and understanding momentum, resistance points, and price movements, which I'd become pretty good at exploiting. None of the factors that influenced the race in play meant anything to me, since I already knew if I locked in a profit or loss before the race went in play, and then I just move on to the next. So for the first few years of trading racing, I was able to wing it and make money every month without knowing anything about the sport. But it didn't stop friends and family from blowing up my phone every Cheltenham and Ascot, asking for tips on who I think is going to win. I mean, how do you explain to the uninitiated how you make money from a sport you know nothing about? Now, that all changed a few years ago when I made the shift successfully from pre-race to in-play trading. And it felt like I was effectively starting all over again, because I had to finally learn and understand the variables that truly influence a race in play. Those things that I was putting off indefinitely for so long, I now had to actually learn. So fast forward to today, and I'm a very capable in-play and pre-race trader on horse racing. But I'm never going to hit the heights that other traders might. I'm never going to be making tens of thousands of pounds a month off racing. And there's a few reasons for that, some of which might resonate with you. Now, firstly, I find horse racing far more unpredictable than humans. Part of the reason why I make bigger money on cricket or have a higher strike rate on golf and boxing is because I can more accurately forecast the human element involved in sports. So I can see more clearly when a human is getting nervous or twitchy, and subsequently predict when they're going to make an error or when they're on a roll and they're going to potentially do something spectacular. Reading a horse race is a lot more of a mechanical process. The horse's running performance largely dictates what I do in play. The moves have to be very obvious before I get involved. So for example, a lot of traders that I know like to get involved very early on in a race. If they notice a bad jump or the jockey's arms are going up and down a little bit more than it should, they like to get stuck in straight away, because the price action is a lot more stable during the early segment of a race. Now, me personally, I have a horrible hit rate when getting involved in the first few furlongs. Like I said, prices are more stable, but a jumping error doesn't necessarily translate to a more sustained movement in the price. So you can only expect to make a couple of ticks. Whereas at the business end of a race, if a horse makes a mistake, especially when it's got tired legs, I'm far more confident about getting involved. Now, most would look at that and say, that's probably more risky since the prices are more volatile. And if I'm wrong, I probably won't be able to exit at a fair price. But I've done rather well trading that particular way and waiting to see when the dots are connected and only firing in bets when I'm very familiar with a certain part of the race course and I'm very clear about how that horse is running at that point in time. So overall, racing is just a very mechanical sport for me to trade. Everything has to come together and a move has to be obvious before I pull the trigger. I'm not, the type of person who can just open a race and look at a horse's price and tell you whether it's value or not. I can't make that determination until the very business end of a race. So whilst I can rely on racing to make, a steady income, it's not really where my talent lies. So, you'll rarely ever catch me making the big moves. I'll never back a horse at, 5-1 or 6-1 even pre-race. Now let's talk a bit about cricket, which is the second main sport that I trade. And it is in fact where I make the most money. But again, I've had no involvement in the sport prior to trading it. I learned it on the job. But unlike racing, I find the sport to be a lot more predictable and a lot less volatile depending on the format you trade. My preference being Test cricket, which is also 100 times more liquid. I remember first opening a test match up on Betfair and seeing tens of millions of pounds being matched. And I thought, bloody hell, what am I doing trading Warwick, in the middle of the week when there's only 200k matched? I want some of this. So my only real motivation at the time getting involved with cricket, again, had nothing to do with a passion for the sport, but the opportunity to make money. So yes, the first factor was liquidity. Had I known what I know now, I probably wouldn't even bothered with racing. I would have dived straight into cricket. So liquidity is one of the most important considerations to make, since it allows you to get in and get out of trades at the desired price. And it also offers the opportunity to dramatically scale up your trading or betting. Which is something that's just so much harder to do on a sport like racing, where, like I said, you can only expect a few $100,000 matched on a race in the middle of the week. It's possible, yes, but exiting trades at a fair price, at the market price, is just not possible to do all the time, since there's so many gaps in the market. Less than a third of the matched money happens in play, which is, the complete opposite in a sport like cricket, golf or boxing, where the majority of the action happens in play. The second element that attracted me to cricket was like I said, the human element. It's much easier, in my opinion, to read a game. I find it easy to see when the ball is nipping about, when the ball is turning and the batsman is struggling, and you can anticipate a wicket, or if a batsman is finding his groove and you can anticipate the price shortening. So when you couple that with the colossal liquidity, I can get on for large stakes and, I can lay it off at a shorter price only 5 or 10 minutes later. To do that sort of thing with thousands of pound stakes is just impossible to do on racing. So yeah, given the human element of cricket, I find it easier to read than a horse signaling that he's, struggling over fences on soft ground. When you couple that with the liquidity, I can act on my hunch, even if it's for only a few minutes, and make money. And as for boxing and golf, these are two sports I get really fired up about. One, because I participate in them and I just love watching it. Actively participating in a sport, in my opinion, is a massive edge, because you can empathize with the emotions and the nuances which actually happen, live. And the spectators outside the ropes may not be able to see that. So because reading the state of play in a golf tournament or a boxing fight is easier than cricket or racing, I don't have to lean on the data too much. In boxing, yes, the weight class, the size of the gloves, the ring size, the home advantage, the referees, yes, those things are important, but not nearly as important as being able to assess a fight. So if the favorite fighter is winning, for example, but he keeps getting caught with a left hook, and if he has poor stamina, there's a big chance he could get knocked out late in the fight, even if he's shorter in price. Or if a boxer goes up in weight, the bookies tend to lean on the bigger, more natural fighter at the weight class. But I have a very good eye at analyzing resumes and seeing how the respective fighters' skills stack up and then pricing them accordingly. I find that bookies are very bad at doing that. I can look at prices and most of the time I'll know straight away whether or not it's value. The boxing punditry also provides good edge for me too, because they often get it so wrong. They end up pushing the price in the wrong direction, so I end up getting better value sometimes on a fight just because of the bad punditry. And we can chalk that up to the fact that most of them are just journalists who stumbled into boxing. As for golf, again, I have a keen eye for the state of play. So for example, I can spot quickly whether or not a player is a little bit off with his putting or his iron play or his driving. I can pick up on those things very quickly. I don't need data to rely on as I would do with racing or cricket. Now, whilst I have a general idea as to how a player has played at a certain course before, I'm more interested in their current form. So for me, golf and boxing, trading is more of an art where I'll have a little bit of data on hand, but I'm just very good at reading the state of play and anticipating odds movements before the event has even started. And this is why I often land, 8-1 or even 10-1 shots in golf. And I'm also happy to let bets go against me for long periods of time and even add to those positions, which is something that I just can't do in a sport like racing. In racing, when the price moves against me, I usually assume that the market is more shrewd than I am. Like I said, my race trading process is far more mechanical. I have to thoroughly understand the variables. I can't look at a horse's price beforehand and tell you whether or not it's right. And like I said, I can only do that right towards the end of the race. And as for cricket, it's somewhat a hybrid between being purely mechanical and it being an art and being instinctive. So that's basically my background, and that's how my trading is shaped up across 4 sports. So in summary, I would say that if you're starting over, your best tangible advantage is to trade a sport that you've had some involvement with. So if you've been going to the racetracks when you were younger, or if you were around stables, or if your dad took you to the bank shops and he was betting, you're probably likely to have a better knack for value than someone like me. If you're starting from scratch like I did, then you've got no choice to other than to learn from the beginning and build out from there. The process, like I've said many times now, becomes mechanical. You have to go by what the data says and only get involved when moves are obvious. But if you haven't played a sport, or if you've played a sport where the betting market is just too illiquid, then you have no advantage, and whatever sport you learn to trade is going to be difficult anyway. In my opinion, the best traders have always had some sort of involvement in the sport. I do fancy myself as one of the best at picking winners in boxing and golf. The best cricket and race traders that I know have nearly always had some sort of involvement in the sport. So there is a recurring theme in that regard. Now, whilst that's no guarantee of success as a trader, understanding a sport intimately is definitely a big edge. If golf and boxing was on daily like cricket and racing, that's all I'd trade. But unfortunately, good opportunities on those 2 sports are too far and few between. So I have no choice but to trade sports that I'm less passionate about on a daily basis. But look, I can think of far worse ways to make a living, so you'll never hear me complaining. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on the journey. Hopefully I've given you some food for thought. If you want video tutorials on how I trade, match previews, value bets, crypto trades, then make sure you're subbed to my premium newsletter. It's an absolute steal in terms of value. And also subscribe, comment, share where possible, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.